Today we're going to talk about how to recognize when you're in a spiritual battle. There's a devil loose. And sometimes there are things that are happening in your life, you just completely are unaware that you're under attack. Religion has made it out to be, well, if something bad happens to you, then you must be doing something wrong. No, there's a devil loose. And he wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And some people really don't want to hear, any kind of teaching on the devil, but you need to be taught about the devil, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to make you think he don't exist and he ain't real. This ain't no Exorcist movie. You understand? This is a real deal. And I am telling you, he's about to get his hiney handed to him. For he has no authority in this place, and he has no authority in you. And you don't have to walk around with a devil all your life. You just got to be smart enough to know you got one. Somebody say, "Hi, what is this going to be like?" Now, if you don't move too quick, I won't think you got one. But I want you to listen to this, because we've been talking about the worthy walk. And there is one situation we have to cover, and that is the enemy is going to fight you every step of the way to stop you from walking that worthy walk. You can be seated. Let's go ahead and get started with this morning. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 1. Now, this is not going to be a spooky thing. We're going to look at what the Word says and examine what the Scriptures have to tell us. We certainly can't ignore these Scriptures. We got to check them out, see what they're talking about. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, he says, "I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation or the calling wherewith you are called, with all lowliness and meekness and with long suffering, forbearing one another in love." Now, you'll notice verse 1 again. Paul is speaking here, and he says, "I therefore." Now, the therefore means, okay, obviously there's something that was mentioned in the previous scriptures, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, to bring him up to chapter 4, where he says, "Therefore." So what was the therefore part? Well, since God called you before the foundations of the world, that he saved you by his grace, that he was determined that before the world was ever created, he determined in his mind and his heart that all believers would be adopted into the family. He determined that you were going to be born with undeserved privileges. He determined that you were going to be holy and righteous and sanctified. And he determined all of that before the foundations of the world. You didn't do anything to earn all of these gifts. This was by the grace and the mercy of God that you were born with undeserved privilege. You are born as a royal, just like those guys over in England. You're born as a royal. Somebody said, "Well, where the money at?" Well, we'll get to that a little later. You're born as a royal. And there are certain privileges you didn't earn, you didn't work for, and you did not deserve. Okay? Therefore, since you were born as sons and daughters of God, since you were born with grace privileges and undeserved privileges, since you were born holy and righteous and with no fault and with perfection, since you were born that way, he says, "I beseech you to go ahead and walk in line. Go ahead and add balance to what God has already done to his grace. He's already declared you are holy, so go ahead and walk worthy of that. He'd already declared that you're righteous, so go ahead and walk worthy of that." In other words, because of what he's done, allow your life to be inspired by what he has done. And since he has done all of these things, go ahead and bring it up to the level of what God has already said. Since you're righteous, he said, go ahead and live righteous. Go ahead and do the things you're supposed to do. And so we've been looking at 5 conditions for the worthy walk. The first one is not expressed in action nor deed, but it was a state of mind and heart. So the first one was all about receiving what he has done, believing you have received it, and then begin to stand on it. The second condition of life worthy of the high calling of God is growth and development of the spiritual life. And so God's wanting us to grow and develop. He doesn't want us to stay baby Christians all of our lives. He wants to take the old man off and put the new man on and to walk worthy of this calling. You're not walking worthy of the calling so you can get God to do something for you. You're not walking worthy of the call so that you can get God to be good to you. Now, God was good to you first, and God's given you all that came through his grace first. You're not doing this to get God to do something. God did it first so that you will inspire to do it because of what he did. See, church and religion has always, taught us, well, you got to do this in order for God to do that. And if you want God to be good to you, you got to be good. No. God was good before you decided to be good, and God's not good to you because you're good. God's good to you because he's good. You follow what I'm saying? So you have to change your thinking around a little bit there. Number 3, we talked about another characteristics of the walk worthy of the calling is to be followers of God as dear children and walking in love and walking in the light. Number 4, we talked about the relationship with other people. To be worthy of the calling should be as though they actually were between the believer and his Lord. And so we're at number 5 today. Finally, praise God, the worthy walk is said to be a conflict with Satan. This worthy walk is said to be a conflict with Satan and the evil spiritual forces of darkness of this world. For this conflict, the believer must be girt about with truth. Now, for this conflict, you've got to know truth. There is a devil loose. There are spiritual, demonic forces loose and have been assigned to your life. There are board meetings that they have to come up with strategy of how to take you down and take you out. And for some reason, we have to recognize what the Bible has to say about this. So let's begin in Ephesians chapter 6 in the NLT, Ephesians chapter 6, verses 12 through 18. Ephesians 6, 12 through 18. And let's lay the foundation here. Now, I'm not going to be, talking spooky stuff today. I'm going to give you some things to recognize when you're under attack. Some stuff that happens in life. And life, a lot of times, brings a lot of things that if you don't know what the word says, life will get the best of you. And we're going to see if we can bring you out of the situation that you may be in today. All right, look what he says. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies. So born again people, our fight is not against Shaquita and them at work that ain't speaking to you. That's just not what you're dealing with. You are not going to allow yourself to get involved in somebody's drama, okay? For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but we are fighting against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world. There is an unseen world that runs concurrently to this physical seen world. Just like this physical world is operating right now, and you have a body to function in this physical world, at the very same time, there is a spiritual world operating with spiritual laws at the very same time. You don't have access with your physical senses into that spiritual world. In fact, when you die, you watch and see, you'll know I'm telling the truth when this happens. You won't be able to come back and tell me it was true, but when you die, you're going to hardly notice that it happened, because the physical world came from the spiritual world. It was the spiritual unseen world first, and then the physical seen world was born out of that spirit world. My God. So the spirit world gave birth to that physical world. You are a spirit. You possess a soul. your mind, your will, and your emotions, your thinker, your feeler, your chooser. And you live in an earth suit so you can comprehend physical matter called a body. When you die, your spirit and soul will separate from your house, move out your house. Because you're no longer in your house, it falls. You're not there to sustain it. But you're in a spiritual world surrounded by spiritual matter, and now that you're out of the physical body and back in the spiritual world, there is spiritual matter that you can now comprehend, just like there was physical matter while you were in the body you could comprehend. So when you pass on, you're going to see all of the wonders of this spiritual matter world. And the things that are unseen are eternal. But the things that are seen are temporary. Everything that existed thousands of years ago existed back then, but it's temporary. Everything in this physical world is temporary. Glory be to God. And there's a spiritual world that awaits you. And I have not yet settled this, but God and I have been talking about this over the last year. There is something more to this coming in this physical world than meets the eye. What? Why we, listen, since we're going back to the spirit world, why we had to leave it in the first place to come in the physical world and get a body? Since we got a spiritual body, what you doing? I think like that. What you doing? One day I get born and I get a body, goo goo gaga, I grow up, and then life comes at everybody. Life comes at everybody, and there's a way to do it. It's like, okay, God says, I'm going to give you some word, and I'm going to show you how to get through the life. And he says, even if you're born again, the godly will suffer persecution. I'm like, well, why be born again if I'm still suffering persecution? Because there's something that's got to happen with you while you're in this physical world. They that live godly shall. Why? Well, we've learned to get yourself in a place where you dismiss that dependence on self and start depending on God more. And life will get you to a point where you might spend 50 years saying, I don't need God, I don't need God, I don't need God. Bam! I need Jesus. And I don't have the answer. I know that one day we're going to step into the spiritual world and we'll understand it better, like the old folks said, by and by. Well, I won't understand it right now, but there's certain things I'm not going to know right now. What is he getting us ready for? Why now do we see nebulons and the glory of space that we've never seen before? And we are on Earth. We are like a speck in a galaxy surrounded by millions of galaxies. And there are better planets equipped to sustain our physical life than the one we're living in right now. Why you got all that out there? You know you're too brilliant, too awesome, too magnificent to make just one Earth. I don't know what's going on here. I ain't never thought we were the only one in the universe. Are you serious? A speck. And yet God said in his word, what is man? That thou art mindful of him, that thou visitest him. I ain't even supposed to be going to all them places I'm going to. There ain't no. But something getting ready to happen. He says, we're not fighting against flesh and blood, enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world. We're fighting against mighty powers in the dark world, in this dark world. and evil spirits in heavenly places. Evil spirits in heavenly places. There are demonic forces that are in chains. Not just in hell, but in heavenly places. Chains. Certain things they can't do to a man while we're in this physical body. But he says there's a fight going on. Get that. There's a fight. He says you are going to be fighting wicked spirits in heavenly places. Rulers of the darkness. He lists there, read this in the King James. Most people have the King James. He lists here 4 classes of demonic forces. When you see people jumping out of buildings and saying life is overrated, that is demonic influence. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, that's one class, against powers, that's another class of demonic forces, against rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places, that's another class. All right, go back to the NLT. Therefore, since you are now aware that you're in a fight, put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Everybody gonna have their time of evil. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm. He didn't say that the battle's gonna be over. He says after this battle, you'll still be standing firm if you put on every piece of God's armor, which is his word and everything he's made available to you. The next verse. Stand your ground. Wow. Stand your ground. I'm the righteousness of God. Now there's a fight coming, and there's an enemy coming. The battle takes place. Well, let me finish. I'm getting ahead of myself. Stand your ground. Put on the belt of truth and the body armor of God's righteousness. 15. For shoes, put on the peace that comes from the good news, so that you will be fully prepared. Now notice what he said. For shoes, put on peace. Next verse. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. The fiery arrows of the devil will be all of the suggestions he makes to your mind to try to get you to believe it so he can take you down. And when you hold up the word of God like a shield, the truth of God saying, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. Next verse. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is what? The word of God. In verse 18, he said, pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert, be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. He said this thing is going to be so aggressive, we need to start praying for each other everywhere. Not fighting each other, not debating with each other, because everybody is going to be under attack. Now, let me show you how this attack takes place here just for a moment here. Here's the first thing I want you to write down. The mind is the battlefield in this spiritual warfare. The mind is the battlefield in this spiritual warfare. Your mind consists of, it is your mind, your will, your emotions. It is your thinker, your chooser, and your feeler. That's where the battle is going to take place every time. It's going to take place with your thinker, your chooser, your feeler. And since your mind is so powerful, there are certain things that can come from your mind, and it can also infect your physical body to kill you. Satan operates, that's where the battle is. Every single time, that's where the battle is. Something happens in life, right here. Oh, Lord, what are we going to do? Something went on in life, oh, God, I'm fearful. Something happened, oh, why did that happen? You know, you can go to the doctor, and the doctor can make a mistake and tell you you died, and you'll start gathering all the symptoms. I learned that most people that were diagnosed with cancer end up dying from something else because of the fear. It's in the mind. It's in the mind, right here. What Are these spirits whispering to you? The most powerful weapon in this fight for those spirits is suggestion. What can he suggest to you that sounds true but not? And it happens all the time. And Christian folks, we still don't have it because the world's teaching us that, well, no, that ain't no devil, that's just you. So now listen to this. Let me ask you at least 5 questions here. And just think now. Are you experiencing sudden and extreme onslaughts of various troubles, losses, and trials? Are you having attacks of physical danger, illnesses, life-threatening losses? Have you noticed increased temptation luring towards sin and wrong choices? Are you experiencing feelings of overwhelming despair, darkness, hopelessness, and fear? And finally, do you have deep confusion, feelings of condemnation, guilt, suicidal ideations, dulled spiritual awareness? If so, then you may be in the midst of an engaging spiritual battle. Now, here's what we're going to do this morning. Let's identify the signs. What are some signs that you might want to look at to say, the devil trying to start something? It's going to be right here now. Forget all that, the plate moved across the table. I mean, I can do that, What's the napkin went up in the air. I can do that too. I mean, don't do nothing I can do. Number one, the first sign, or one of the signs you should look at, fatigue. Fatigue. Now, I know that physically we run off energy and stuff, and everybody gets tired. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about soul, a tired soul.